Good day, and welcome to the Budding Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Bridges. In each episode, I cover my experiences, both good and bad, of being a business builder, as well as my journey through the crazy world of entrepreneurship to reach my goal of earning $10 million a year. All right. We are on episode 158 of the podcast. Today is Friday, July 26th, 2024. This is Randy Bridges for the Budding Entrepreneur Podcast. Jumping into today's agenda, we're going to be taking a quote from Jocko Willink, and I'll have a little bit more information about him a little bit later. And then since this is the fourth week of the month, we've been talking about servant leadership all month as one of the different ways of really putting new leadership spins on your business. Today, we're going to kind of turn a corner and go to next month's topic, and we'll be kind of putting these together as transformational leadership. Now, this is very different in some ways and very similar to servant leadership in others. We're going to be talking about how they work together. We're going to be talking about key differences between the two. We're going to be discussing some leader changes that are going to be necessary and business changes that are going to happen if you move from servant leadership into transformational leadership. And next week, we'll go into more detail about what that whole program is like, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. In our quote from Jocko Willink, he's a former Navy SEAL and a best-selling author. I read a lot of his material. He's a really unusual but very brilliant man. His quote was this: "For leaders, the humility to admit and own mistakes and develop a plan to overcome them is essential to success. The best leaders are not driven by ego or personal agendas. They are simply focused on the mission and how best to accomplish it." And that's, that kind of puts a little bit of spin on some of the things that happen to us as business owners. We have to become business leaders. And that's part of what the transition to entrepreneurship is about, is getting out of the way of you and your ego and getting to something that's actually going to drive the business forward and bring everyone with it. So, to me, that's really the ultimate goal of any business, is to impact the employees, the leaders, the customers, and the customers' families, and everyone, the employees' families, and, everything that business touches. We want to make and improve that process. That's where leaders really stand out. And I don't necessarily consider myself a truly accomplished leader. I'm surrounded by tremendous ones inside of my various ecosystems. So I'm not so brave and bold as to say I'm a tremendous leader. I'm a learning leader. I'm like many others. I've been doing business since 2008 and 2012 on my own as a business owner. And I continue to learn. As we are talking about our topics today in leadership, part of the move is to learn, and this is why I'm really focusing here, it's to learn how to use the best leadership style for the type of business you are running and the needs of that business and the customers that you take on, the clients that you take on. And so that's something that is forward thinking as a topic. Some people are kind of wondering about this, and they've sent me some questions online is, hey, why are you doing this? And that's really what the goal is, to equip people with the tools and the toolkits that they need to be successful in running both their business, their own leadership style, and the things that are going to make them all, along with the people, much better. Now on for some announcements. I want to mention that Randy Bridges Consulting has taken on a bit of a new focus, and I've split some things off. If you know anything about me, I have 3 entities: L5 Cloud, L5 Consulting, and Randy Bridges Consulting. And I really wanted to create unique silos. They can work together and they can provide a complete solution for somebody. But what I really wanted to do is break L5 consulting out to continue to focus on systemization and automation for particularly professional services. L5 Cloud still does the cloud hosting, the software, the environments, dealing with the networking and everything else. I want to use it as a vehicle for L5 Consulting to use. With Randy Bridges Consulting, and I'm going back a few years here, I mentioned this a bit before, but I spent a lot of time doing counseling in college and psychology and training. I wanted to be a teacher. So, what I've decided to do is take Randy Bridges Consulting and make sure that it can provide personal coaching for business owners of all types, specifically around topics of elite performance, operational efficiency, and stress management. The amount of weight that sits on your shoulders every day can be crippling. It can be completely debilitating. And until you can control the stress in your life and really manage it, right? Not so much control it, but manage it. Until you can do that, until you have the tools that you need to achieve that, you're going to be an inefficient leader at best. Another announcement is that I am finalizing a new book. I have one book that I am in the process of rewriting, just simply because I wanted to put more depth into it and create a workbook for it. This new book is tentatively titled The Service Growth Path. Now, I'm sure I'm going to come up with a better one. I'm going to be working with my publisher to be able to do that. But for certain, it's going to be released on Kindle. I'm not sure when, because I have to go back through and do the typical rewrite that occurs with any book. But again, it is being finalized. I'm going to have to be doing some beta testing and getting some extra copies and what have you. This is going to be longer than my last book, way longer. I want to really make sure I have the best information, the best models, the best frameworks, the best systems that I have included for people to be able to use in their business and to a point in their life. Moving into business strategies, this month we are talking and have been talking about servant leadership. Next month, we're going to be discussing transformational leadership. And I want to kind of talk about the differences between these two, because there will be times when you can move from servant leadership to transformational leadership. And we want to understand in advance some of the differences and some of the similarities so we know what areas of the business are likely to be impacted by this. One of the easiest differences about moving from servant leadership to transformational is that servant leadership is about team empowerment, whereas transformational leadership is about inspiring and driving change. So the outcomes of these are different. One of them is at the individual level, and the other one is at the individual to the team level. So if we look at servant and transformational leadership, when they're working together, they have a shared focus on people. In servants, you're prioritizing the needs and the development of employees, fostering a supportive and collaborative environment. Whereas transformational leaderships do the same thing, but they emphasize inspiring and motivating employees to achieve a shared vision. Okay? There's also employee empowerment. With servant leaders, you are working with their needs and providing the resources they need to succeed. Whereas with transformational, you're creating a sense of purpose and motivating individuals and the group to exceed their own expectations. You can also build trust and relationships with both of these. Essentially, servant leaders are using empathy, active listening, and putting others first, whereas transformational leaders are personally demonstrating integrity, setting a compelling vision, and being a role model along with people. So one of the things that you can do as a difference for them is encouraging innovation and creativity. Now, obviously, transformational wants to challenge the status quo, and there is some creative thinking as we'll be discussing. The key differences are primarily in leadership style. In servant leadership, they're more focused on individual needs of employees and fostering a culture of service. In transformational, they're more focused on driving change and achieving organizational goals through that shared vision. There's also decision-making differences. Servant leaders tend to collaborate with people in getting significant input from the various employees. Whereas in transformational, the leaders make decisions that align with the vision and then inspire others to follow. In the area of motivational approach, servant leadership the motivation comes from fulfilling the needs of employees. Whereas transformational, it's inspiring the employees with that vision and asking them, challenging them to achieve more. And the focus of leadership changes as well because servant is primarily focused on service and support, where transformational is primarily focused on transformation, as the word implies, and achieving long-term goals. Now, if we look at different changes that are required in the business leader in making the move from servant to transformational, and these would be the same kind of changes that would be required in reverse if you found yourself transformational moving to servant. First of all, you have to adopt a visionary approach for this kind of a transition. If you want to make this work, you have to articulate a clear, inspiring vision for the future. You also have to enhance your own communication skills. Moving from primary listening and emphasizing to also being persuasive is a big difference because you want to inspire and motivate in a transformational, and people are going to be moving towards your vision. You have to be able to communicate that. Embracing change and innovation is another major change. There's got to be comfort with change and an ability to drive innovation within the organization in a transformational system. You also want to balance individual and organizational needs. The balancing of individual employees with the broader goal of the organization or goals of the organization is key. And finally, another thing about a transformational leader is that they build a presence that commands respect and inspires others to follow. And this is key. This is where we go back to Jocko Willink being, he was a Navy SEAL trainer. He wasn't just a Navy SEAL, he was also a trainer. So he had to really teach people to be able to think on their feet, even no matter what is going on. Bullets flying by your head, bombs going off, whatever it may be, or simply to make them blend in and be able to absorb the culture that they are blending into. This is something that was a major focus for him. And so as a trainer and a teacher, his role had to be very charismatic in that he had to actually do the same thing that he was training people on. Now, if we look at the business itself, there is a major cultural shift from a culture of service and support to one of innovation and change. Now, you've heard those two sets of words over and over again. And that's because employees have to be encouraged to think creatively and be willing to take some risk in order to make a transformational business work. And in that risk, that's where you really need the charismatic leader to help absorb the simple fact that taking risk is a normal thing. See, we as business owners, we as business leaders, we deal with risk all day long. We're doing risk management consistently. But the average employee, the average person working inside the company is less likely to take on risk management. In fact, if anything, they're into risk avoidance, right? They don't want to get fired. They don't want to get reprimanded. And so that cultural shift really impacts that need to make that move. Also, in training and development, the leaders and the employees have to understand and embrace the principles of transformational leadership. And we'll talk about that next month. In communicating strategy and communication strategy, you want to convey this new vision to inspire employees to get on board. There has to be regular communication and progress towards goals and celebration of achievements. In my own training that I'm going through now, I've moved into the next level of training with the Wealthy Consultant. I'm now in what they call Chamber B, which right now, and we've done it in Launch Kit, but this becomes even greater, is celebrating wins. That's so important, okay? And so communicating those wins matters. Also, there's performance metrics that are really required in transformational. How can you transform what you can't measure? And as far as the organizational structure, it's going to be more dynamic and flexible, but it also has to be supportive of quick decision making and adaptability. And when we move into agile leadership, which comes after transformational, you'll see even a greater portion of that. If we look at servant and transformational leadership from a product-based business perspective, there are some changes, okay? Number one, the customer focus in a product-based business is much higher. You want the transformational leadership to require a stronger focus on market trends and customer feedback because you need to drive product innovation. With servant leadership in product-based businesses, it's usually emphasizing the customer service and satisfaction, less about building a better product along the way. Innovation cycles in a product-based business may need to adapt to be more responsive to market changes under transformational leadership, whereas servant leadership may prioritize incremental improvements based on customer feedback. So putting these together, you're looking for incremental versus sometimes large-scale changes. You don't want to make too many changes at one time, but in a transformational environment, you really want to make sure that your innovation cycle is matched to the way that the market is telling you. And in resource allocation, transformational leaders may require you to reallocate the resources, humans, time, and money, towards research and development along with strategic initiatives. Whereas servant leadership may focus resources on enhancing customer experiences and employee development. So you can see this overall view of servant leadership and transformational leadership being a very unique way of going about things. There is a lot of overlap. But when the goals change on the underlying side, such as transformational leadership, it affects every part of the business, primarily with leadership becoming more, what's the word I'm looking for? Large scale. They have to command a presence and they have to command a vision of where things are going and how they're driving. And so many of the businesses that are out there that are product-based are transformational businesses by default. So that's going to be our business strategy for the day. I'll give you our overall agenda for transformational leadership. Week 1 is going to be key components, implementation tips, and benefits. Week 2, we're going to do a deeper dive into the implementation within the business. We'll talk a little bit more at a deeper level, see how far down the rabbit hole things go. Week 3 is our case study, and I'm going to try to bring in an interview from one of the transformational leaders that I have in my network, and hopefully we'll be able to do like we did last week with Luke Rieseberg, where we have a back and forth as a nice conversation, and then you get the benefit of being able to see that from multiple points of view. Finally, in week 4, we're going to do just kind of how we did it today, a comparison and a contrast of transition and the transition from transformational leadership to agile leadership. So that's it for today on The Budding Entrepreneur. I hope this has been very helpful for you. On our agenda, we did our quote from Jocko Willink. On our business strategies, we talked about the transition from servant leadership to transformational leadership. Next week, we'll be spending all of our time working on transformational leadership. I thank you very much for your time. I wish you the best in your health, your wealth, your business, your family, everything about you. Take care. We'll talk to you next week.